Hello, welcome to today's Aquila University. We will be discussing Australia and their new eCTD acceptance, their Module 1, and a little bit of what it looks like and how to submit to Australia. So, quick note, this is being recorded, and we will be putting it up on our website. If you have any concerns about having your name, question, and of course the answer recorded, please connect and I will send you an email when the session is available online. My name is Josh Boutwell. I founded Aquila Solutions in 2010, and since then we've been submitting eCTDs and other electronic submissions all around the world and are excited to be able to go into Australia as well. A brief overview of today's topic. We will be discussing Australia, what it means that Australia has joined the eCTD, history. We'll go through the Module 1 structure, the specific regional requirements, and like any other region, Australia has some interesting issues that you want to be aware of. There'll be time for questions at the end, and of course, a little bit about our next Lunch and Learn. 27 May, Australia releases this notification on their website. They finalized the eCTD backbone for their region. And primarily because they're hoping to be able to make it easier for sponsors and manufacturers to interface with the TGA, and this is the current international standard. Australia accepts the eCTD. We now have regions which you can now submit fully electronic, or just about fully. Of course, there's the U.S. and the EU. Those are purely electronic. You need any paper. There's Canada, Switzerland, Japan, and the Gulf Coast countries. All have been accepting eCTD for a while, but you do have to submit some paper. And finally, now we have Australia. So we're now at 7 regions that accept eCTD. Just a little bit of history behind Australia's acceptance. They really adopted the CTD format in 2004 and have been accepting NICE, which is the non-eCTD electronic submission format, since about 2010. And this is explicitly allowed as an interim measure as sponsors move towards full eCTD compliance. In 2014, they released a 0.9 version of their Module 1. And it was a pilot project which a number of companies took part in, and they received a fair amount of feedback, and that was finalized in this May to version 3.0. The difference between 0.9 and 3.0 are internal versions from the TGA. So what does the M1 structure look like? This, just like all the regions, it has envelope information and then a backbone information. Are the values for the envelope. In the U.S., you have the application number, the sequence number, the date. Everything in that section at the top of the U.S. regional is the envelope information. This sort of information that TGA is asking for. So we have our or an ID, the applicant, any names that have been approved by Australia, and there can be multiple of these, any other names this product goes by, and again, there can be multiple of these, the application number, or this is the ARTG number is a tracking number that is used for, I believe, DMFs. Then there is the sequence description, which is required and has something called a defined list, which we will discuss later. Our sequence number, and this is our standard 4-digit number. Our sequence, similar to what the FDA uses. The regulatory activity lead. This describes what type of activity you're trying to do with this submission. Is an information amendment, is a CMC amendment, that sort of thing. Then we have sequence type, and again, it's mandatory and has another defined list. The backbone itself consists of 13 sections, which are similar to other regions. One thing to note, the 1.1 is a table of contents, but it's only for NIS. If it's eCTD, you should ignore this. And just like other regions, there's correspondence, administrative information forms, linking, there's information about the experts is where you put CC, clinical or non-clinical information that doesn't going in those modules. That's response to specific questions by Australia, that sort of thing. Then you can see a lot of these things translate pretty tightly to other regions. So what are specific regional requirements? Now, Australia has two different categories. There's new registration and variation. Obviously, registration would be your initial application. Variation is anything that happens after that. And there are three categories. Category 1, which in the U.S. would be a 505, B1, or B2. It's a chemical entity or significant change. And they go into much greater detail on what this actually means, but that's what it amounts to. If in the U.S. it was 505, B1, or B2, it's almost certainly category 1. Category 2 is a generic with a bioequivalence study. It's already been registered either in Australia or in one of the countries that Australia recognizes as having essentially, for instance, if the FDA approves it, then Australia, if the FDA and like the EU, it requires two, approve it, then it can be considered number 2 instead of number 1. The number 3 would be the equivalent of a generic with a bio waiver. No clinical or non-clinical data is required by this submission. Now, very brief overview of what's required, what's not. Black dots indicate is required for that submission, for the category and submission. The white circle may be required depending on the specific requirements of your application. And the X indicates it's never required in that submission type. And it goes through all the 13 sections for, I apologize. This is for the submission. And so, number one, this is a different. This is the cover letter section, and there, for instance, there's a cover letter, there's a tracking table, and there's a response to request for information. There's if they issue a formal request and it doesn't, and you want to respond to the request itself, this is where it would go. Like point 1 is not for the eCTD format. 1.2 is all of our applications, all of our for the application. 3 talk about your labeling. And 4 is the information from about experts. As you see, it's 3 sections: quality, non-clinical, and clinical. If your experts want to formally respond to something or provide additional information that is in a direct response to a request, TGA, they would put it here, especially if it's sort of a discussion response rather than a report. You recall the FDA has a very similar section. Literature documents, the orphan drug requests and things like that. This goes into a lot of detail that I really won't go through because that is outside the scope of this project. But this gives you a detailed list of all the different sections that go into the Australian Module 1. And as you for an evaluation of reports, it's been approved in other countries. You may need to talk about it, or you may not. And separate, unlike most other things, category 1 and 2 are different here. Interesting issues with this submission. On the conversion, baseline is required. The U.S. and now the EU, you do have to submit a baseline there. But for Australia, if you're converting from paper or from NICE, you submit a current copy of everything that's current in the structure that you anticipate that you use. Now, you don't have to do external linking, but they do have to be properly structured and properly remediated internally. So you're looking at about 95% of the publishing work to create a baseline. This you must request prior to submission. Send them an email with some information, and you get a number. A 6 or 7 digit code beginning with a letter. Noting, unlike the U.S., the TGA wants all the different reports in their own node. You have STFs, you can include them, but they won't really be used. However, if you include them, they better be valid, or it will cause a validation error when you submit. And append. No nation likes append, but it is explicitly denied for Australia unless you're updating an STF. If you use an append anywhere else, it will be a validation error, and you have to justify the use in your cover letter. So generally, avoid append, and this goes for every region, especially here. Avoid append. Now, let's talk about that envelope, the envelope metadata. Actually fairly complex, and some elements have been retired in version 3, in this version 3.0 from version 0.9. The well, it's sponsor's choice whether you want to use 0.9 or 3.0. They have to accept the retired data elements for the envelope. And so there's some accommodation for that. Three of the are a defined list, with something that you're going to be seeing more and more of. The new module 1 for FDA has some defined lists, and be very, very important when everyone starts moving towards RPS. That's one of the things that defines RPS are these lists that tell you what goes in each section dynamically. And so in this case, the defined lists are XMLs that are available on the TGA website, and they contain a set of coding for the metadata in the envelope elements. And they can require some extra information. And there are 4 options. There's version number, as in this element is only suitable for version 0.9, or is suitable for any version after 3.0 or later. There's a flexibility in how to present it. Version date, as when was this submitted? When is this, this report good for? An example would be an annual report. You would a version date, starting version date and an ending version date. And that way it's easy for them to identify what time period you're talking about. There are coded values that may be included, and some of them have plain text for the value. And just as a quick note, when the plain text, that's what the viewer sees. They don't see any of the back-end coding, just what you put in for the plain text. So, like I said, there are 3 sections. The C description is actually the most complicated because it did a lot of rework version 9. As you can see, expired, not valid after version 9. This is a copy straight from the XML from TGA's website. And you would identify in your element sequence description 1, which means it's administrative, but it's not valid anymore. So 2 would be your initial, sequence 3, your prepackage, all the way down. There's 25 options, but it looks like 9 have been discontinued, so you can use them anymore with version 3. Just again gives you an idea of the different options. I said some have version numbers, version dates, coded values. You can tell what's required by the thing in these brackets. This is date. It's a date :D. That indicates you have to put a date in brackets in order to be able to pass validation. So date. In this RPM version, so this is a number. It's a 1 through whatever, and date. Unsolicited data, you need to provide, S means text. You have to provide a plain text description with uncategorized. Regulatory activity lead. This just identifies what type of product you're submitting. It's a very nice and short list. Then of the sequence type. There are 52 of these. Obviously, I don't have room for that, and to blunt, there's not enough time in this talk to go through all of them, so I'm just giving you a little example. And again, you would just put in your sequence type. So you have a minor variation, new registrar entry, new container type. New container type would be sequence type 14. Is a link to the actual XML, so you can go and check out the full list yourself. Now, are there any questions? Questions, please feel free to contact us at any time. And of course, Aquila is more than capable of helping you with any submissions to Australia or any other regions that accept eCTD. You can please give us a call if you need assistance. Our next Aquila University will be about eCopy. And this is what is eCopy, who has to do it, and things you should consider. And presenting it October 9th in 2 weeks at 2 p.m. Eastern. If there are no questions at this point, I wanted to thank you for attending this presentation, and I hope you will join us next time.